Arcane starts off by showing the world. War, disparities, death, and tragedy. Vi and Powder just lost their parents in a violent encounter with Piltover, their first scar. So basically, the root of everyone's problems is the conflict between Piltover and the Undercity. In fact, if you go to Arcane's website, you can go and check out the creator's lore that explicitly states a house divided, 2 sisters, 2 cities. So it is a clear analogy between the cities and the sisters. Arcane is a masterclass on villains because we can empathize with them. We saw the source of their pain or how cool they can be. They are likable villains. But how can we empathize so much with these lovable, despicable characters? We don't know much about Silco's backstory, and first he's presented to be the typical villain. In his first scene, the writers use the kick the cat technique, quite literally. He allows Singe to put his cat in the same cage as the rats injected with Shimmer, and doesn't react when the kitty is dead.
Yo, I'ma check his vibe. What are you? Yeah, what are you? Bad vibe!
He's mostly the cliché crime boss, but keen on science and industrialization to advance the Undercity. Overall, Silco is a fan of progress, but it is there that he leans on a more darker side. He's a well-intentioned extremist, since all the gruesome acts he might do will be done in the name of Zon, especially getting revenge on Piltover for all the bad things they've done to the Undercity's people, Silco's people. Essentially, he is power hungry, even though Silco's motivations lie in the Undercity's independence.
You see, power, real power, doesn't come to those who are born strongest, or fastest, or smartest. No, it comes to those who will do anything to achieve it.
What's clear is that Silco's and Vander's ideologies clashed, and that's what divided them. We just don't know when it started and how it started. Silco gets the best of Vander, undermining his attempts at peace until he manages to capture and kill him. By doing so, Silco gains the reins of the Undercity, able to change the political landscape and economy. The grudge Silco held towards Vander is not only based in political views, but also in personal reasons. Vander tried to kill Silco, his best friend, and Silco seemed quite surprised when it happened. Perhaps their different approach to Zon's independence was the root of the problem, since we're forced to assume Silco, before Jinx, consistently had a more extremist view. In addition to that, their conflicts could have been plunging a deep rift in the society of the Undercity when they already had to worry about Piltover. It is something obvious after the first 3 episodes. Moreover, Silco takes over with the help of those who used to be allied with Vander. Once Vander is out of the picture, something rather ironic happens. Because he's an extremist, Silco deemed Vander soft and weak after he became a father, searching to appease animosities by making deals with the sheriff. It's one of the reasons Vander's allies betrayed him. When it comes to Silco's turn to rule over the Undercity, he also makes pacts with the sheriff, although they have a different power balance. Despite his extremism, we see that he keeps in touch with the new sheriff for the same reasons Vander once did, for the future generations of the Undercity. for Jinx.
Oh, it all makes sense now, brother. Is there anything so undoing as a daughter?
By loving Jinx as his daughter, he finally understands why Vander was the way he was, which he despised at the time. He can only be vulnerable to her, both emotionally and physically, since he trusts Jinx so much that he lets her inject likely shimmer in his fucking eye. At the end of the season, Silco finally has everything he's fought for his entire life at his grasp, if only he delivered Jinx to Piltover. This is the inevitable point in the story that makes him more fragile and more relatable. Especially in the scene of his death, the viewer can't help but feel sorry for the tragedy unfolding of a daughter losing a father. His last words prove his unwavering love for Jinx, hinting that he would have been fine losing everything he's ever fought for in exchange for Jinx's love.
I never would have given you to them. Not for anything. Don't cry. You're perfect.
In a beautiful way, the writers of Arcane have mirrored Silco's and Jinx's character growth. We start with Silco being a classic cruel villain and Powder being a cute, naive girl. When Silco becomes a father and a likable character, Jinx becomes slowly an unhinged villain, hurt by her adoptive father's death. Jinx hasn't always been Jinx, which was the cleverest way they could find to write her character. Powder is nothing but a sweet, innocent girl, trying to impress her older sister. The young girl struggles to keep up with the older siblings, and her arc mainly stems from this problem. The smartest way to tell her story was by telling it from the beginning, without resorting to flashbacks, and taking their time. The proof of that is that although it's shocking to know Vander betrayed Silco, Vi's betrayal has much more weight because we're experiencing events in chronological time. The pace is also a very important factor since we get to know Vi and Powder in the first episode as we learn what's at stake, what they've lost, and who they are. So telling her story chronologically and paying attention to pace is crucial when it comes to understanding Jinx. If we had known her like Silco, like first the crazy villain and then we got in flashbacks when she was Powder, the empathy established had been diminished. So we start with a tragic story where Powder is abandoned by the one person who should have stayed by her side. It's only natural that in her innocence, Powder sought comfort in the first person who opened arms for her, Silco. However, as she becomes Jinx, delving deeper into trauma, the memory of her sister never abandoned her.
You never left. I always heard you. Shadows in the streets, prickles on the back of my neck. Your voice pushing me, picking me up when all the colors were black. You're the reason I'm still alive.
Either Jinx or Powder, she's just a deeply wounded person trying to understand what happened to her as a child when her parents, Vander, Milo, and Clagger, died and Vi abandoned her. There is also the issue of feeling useless when she was a child that was aggravated by Milo's antagonism, eventually diminishing her self-worth. A certain level of dependency with Vi worsened her mental state at an early age, given that her older sister pushed her to do things like the other older kids, and when she failed, Vi uplifted her. It's like Vander said, Vi couldn't act without thinking of the consequences.
Those kids look up to you.
Yeah, I know.
You know, but you don't know. But whatever happens, it's on you.
Although understandable because they were both children, considering what Powder had done, slapping Powder, calling her a Jinx, disowning her, and abandoning her, created a deeper rift in Powder's heart. If Vi had kept her shit together, Powder would have never been hurt to the point of becoming Jinx.
Well, then get your shit together! Get it all together and put it in a backpack!
All her childhood trauma reflects in the person Jinx is. Even though sometimes silly, her mood is mostly somber, haunted by hallucinations of the people she loved and accidentally killed. She is mentally unstable, and a rather morbid example of her state is when she created the life-size dolls of Milo and Claghor and kept on talking to them. The most heart-shattering behavior is when she becomes more unstable due to discovering that some people are keeping her away from Vi. Anything that remotely hints that Vi might betray her again also shakes her to the core, manifesting as her dislike for Caitlyn, for example. At the end of the season, the viewer understands why Jinx is the way she is, and it is ultimately hurtful to see her go down the destruction path, especially since it might end up in her demise. Vi created Jinx, not Silco, who Vi villainizes often for everything bad that's ever happened. Despite their toxic relationship, Silco accepted Jinx with all her flaws, while Vi expected her to turn back to the Powder she knew. There is no doubt a toxic element to their relationship, despite how wholesome they found a family in each other, a family of outcasts. The start of their relationship is even stained with Vander's death and Vi's betrayal. After realizing her mistakes and Vi abandoning her when Silco offers some comfort, Powder is so broken that she jumps at him for a hug. Even though I sense that Silco adopted Jinx out of the little kindness in his heart, there was a part of him that took her in out of spite to further hurt Vander somehow. There's certainly a hint of malice in his eyes. Fast forward a few years and Jinx is barely held accountable for her actions by this very dangerous character who's supposed to be the bad guy who intimidates everyone. Due to Jinx's need of approval and Silco's attachment, he's unable to reprimand her for the chaos she causes, which is reminiscent of the trope of the father who does everything for his spoiled daughter. Silco's enabling inaction would later be his demise. It is first displayed when Jinx appears for the first time after the time skip, screwing up the mission because she thought she saw Vi. Sevica reports to Silco that Jinx froze up and fired at her allies, to which Silco says, "There are always mishaps in battle." When he is alone with Jinx, his tone shifts dramatically than that with Sevica, and grows more tender rather than threatening.
Won't happen again.
I know.
Despite apologizing, Jinx just does whatever she wants and doesn't care about the consequences. Silco urges her to focus on her gadgetry, but Jinx ignores his orders. Well, in a way, she did focus on her gadgetry.
I brought this dynamite. Goodbye!
Her insubordination is accentuated when she begins torturing Silco after learning that Vi's alive. Every time she goes against his orders, there are no punishments from him, even though it might lead to a betrayal among his other subordinates. Despite her rebellious act, Jinx is devoted to her adoptive father, being affectionate, giving him hugs, and helping him with his eye. Their relationship sours once she finds out that Vi is alive. In a protective way, Silco was trying to keep her from finding Vi, out of fear he would lose her or because Jinx could get hurt again by her sister. After everything he's been through with Vander too, it's only natural he saw Jinx as himself and Vi as Vander. Even more so, her behavior worsens when she overhears Silco talking to Vander's statue about his deal with Jace, completely misunderstanding the situation. When Jace presents him the opportunity to finally have Zon, the nation he and many others dreamt of, but only when he delivers Jinx, Silco's world comes crashing down.
1,000 times I've imagined this moment. Never like this. All we ever wanted. The boy didn't even haggle. And what do I lose but problems?
The reason why Silco didn't refuse Jace right away doesn't matter, because what the viewer knows is that he refused to hand over Jinx to Piltover. At a point of no return, Jinx decides to have a family reunion of sorts, a way to understand who she is and who she's with, Powder or Jinx, Vi or Silco. She spends the whole season conflicted about her identity and feelings until she can't take it anymore. When things escalate and Silco attempts to kill Vi, Jinx rushes to her sister's help. However, after she accidentally kills him, she is racked with guilt, especially after Silco confesses he never would have handed her to Piltover. After realizing this and once again mirroring her acts in episode 3, she fully turns into Jinx, completely forgetting about Vi and Powder. So to wrap up, we can agree that telling the story of a character in chronological order is more impactful than resorting to flashbacks. Silco and Jinx are the proof of that. Who do we feel more empathy towards? Jinx. The pace is also important when it comes to character development. The creators of the show could have spent only one episode on the child version of Jinx and Vi. Instead of rushing, they took their time with 3 episodes so that the audience could internalize the dynamics between characters, their flaws and strengths, to later understand better what's at stake for each character. Good events, memories and feelings have a place in everyone's life, and that doesn't exclude villains. To have more entertaining stories, your villains need to have a human side to them, showing they're fragile, get hurt, cry, or feel happy with mundane things. This is the way to make your reader/viewer feel empathy towards them. I honestly could go on about the characters in Arcane and why they're so well written, But ultimately, I think the most perfect job they did was with the villains, because oftentimes villains are portrayed to be this one-sided characters, and Silco and Jinx have trauma, have been betrayed, they have been victims, and they have experienced good things, like they found a family in each other, and that's what makes them so great, because they're just not one-sided characters. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. Bye. It is a clear analogy. The character fuck me sideways. Fuck me. When things escalate and Thilco